Good morning, everybody. Will you join me in prayer? Heavenly Father, may the words of our mouth and the meditations of our heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. Such a beautiful passage we have here. It's it's a continuation of the book of Matthew, which we've been going over for the past weeks now, and we've been diving more into the parables that Jesus has been teaching and kind of blessing the people of his time with this profound message, right? Because stories are a method by which the Hebrew people teach. Similarly to us, in our day and age, we tend to use stories ourselves to kind of illustrate a point or to try to, to teach some kind of moral or ethical principle, right, to little children. So when Christ is doing this, think of it in that context as well. He's kind of speaking to two audiences here. He's speaking to adults, right? And then he's also speaking to little children. Okay. So in the event that those individuals who are adults were to hear his message and bring it back home with them, they could also tell this story to their children. And children are very, very um, amazing listeners, right? Their attention opens up when they start to hear stories. It allows for their imaginative cues within their minds to go ahead and try to rationalize what they're learning. So interestingly, today we have a amazing parable, right? Is the parable of the two sons. And Jesus here begins by telling Jesus here begins by telling them, I will ask you one question. If you tell me the answer, then I will also tell you by what authority I do these things, right? Because he's being questioned about who he is and where his source comes from. And I think speaks to us today because we always want to be credible in everything that we do, especially when we look at the media, right? If you go on social media or you go on a news outlet, what we call the mainstream media, those outlets, we tend to want to quote unquote fact check to make sure that the source is credible. It's not just an opinion that somebody is giving, it's not slanderous in nature, and it's not just a device like propaganda, for instance, to try to get us to move our position, to shift from wherever we're at and to join up with the next group or individual who's trying to give us this message that we're receiving. So think of it on those lines. Credibility is a huge factor. And if Jesus is going around performing these vast miracles and professing to be the Son of God, right, and the Messiah, which is a huge word in the Jewish culture, then there's got to be some credibility behind it. Okay. And here Jesus is saying, he continues and says, did the baptism of John come from heaven or was it in human origin? And and they kind of looked back on them and said, the people were kind of responded like, if we say from heaven, he will say to us, then why did they not believe? Like now what they're trying to do is, Jesus is positioning himself very well. He's an outstanding orator. He's an outstanding uh, speaker and teacher who's able to use his words very limitedly, all right, to go ahead and prove a point. And the people are trying to make sure when they respond, they're doing what we do as humans. Think about it. If I do this, then this is what's going to happen. And if I do this is what's going to happen. But I kind of don't want to do this, and I kind of don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push back a little bit and tell him, tell the people that are around me, if we say this, then he's just going to say that, you know. And but they responded right with him after saying both outlets of if we say he was of human origin or if we say he was from heaven, they answer Jesus, we don't know. And then Jesus says, neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things, because it's clear that they don't understand what's going on. They don't understand Christ's miracles. They don't understand who Christ is. And if they can't understand who Christ is, they're not going to understand the ones who Christ is sending, right? They're going to think that those individuals who he's sending, all right, are truly, they're just blasphemous speakers who are going out there and saying horrible things about God, all right, professing that some random person is the Son of God and misleading people to do what misleading people to stray from the Judaic law. But what happens here is we get Jesus into another parable. He says, well, a man had two sons. One went to the first and said, go and work in the vineyard. And he stopped and he was like, no. But later he changed his mind. And he went to the second and said, go. And he didn't go. And Jesus, it's a really interesting parable when you think about it. Which of the two did the will of the Father? And they said the first. But then, Jesus says, truly I tell you, the tax collectors and the prostitutes are going to the kingdom of heaven ahead of you. And they're confused by this statement. Like, how are the tax collectors and the prostitutes are going into the kingdom of heaven before them? When we think about this in their minds, sometimes we tend to think that we are super Christian. We are super religious. We are super obedient because we are tally markers. We look off and we say, well, we did X amount of things in our lives. When I saw the homeless person on the side of the road, I gave them $1. We tend to look at the things that we do, and that kind of surmises our charitable nature, right? It kind of makes us out to be more spiritual than the next. And when I say spiritual, I mean that we have a connection to some outer being, okay, somewhere. And we're gonna reference God, because that's what we believe in: God, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. We tend to think we're more spiritual than the next person, but this is far from true, right? Because Christ is telling you that if you think about it, that no matter how many people are out there performing these good deeds for show and tell purposes, you can say, okay, I show it, I do it, and I go and tell somebody about it, that this doesn't amount to anything. It is the belief that we have, that construct within us, that if we believe, then we will make it. That is the cornerstone of our faith, all right, of our belief. The cornerstone of our belief is faith. We have to have 100% faith, okay? But we can 100% believe in something, believe this or not, but not truly agree with it, okay? Think about this. And someone's going to say, well, how is that true? How do you believe something 100%, but you just don't believe in it? And I ask you to think about things in your own life that are factual. There are people out there that are going to tell you that there are no evils in the world, that specific people are not doing wrong in the world, that they are completely in good, right? They 100% believe in this person, okay? However, they will not sit there and say anything negative about them. They're going to continue to uphold those who are out there, even so much granting them more power. So when we look at the scriptures and when we look at what's going on, a big part of this has to do with us believing, has to do with our faith and how we're going to take that faith with us into the world the next day, the day after, so on and so forth. Lastly, Christ is there. He tells us, for John came to you in the way of righteousness and you did not believe him, but the tax collectors and the prostitutes believed him. It seems like, Christ is always talking about the lowest and the most hated. Prostitutes are like the lowest, right? And then tax collectors are like the most hated. Okay, they're like the ones that are rejected by the social class, the social classes that are there. They completely don't like them because the tax collector comes to take your money, and the prostitutes are making vile of the sanctity of women, all right, and of the covenant of marriage, if you think about it, by through fornication and that kind of act. Really, though, those individuals were listening to John the Baptist. Those individuals were the ones that were more concerned with what he was talking about, the applicability within their lives, something to make the change for them to live more righteously. However, the righteous ones, what in the Bible refers to as the Pharisees and the Sadducees, right, who are living religiously, who are living this super Jewish life, you can call it, who are doing things that are quote unquote by the law of God and also by the law of Jerusalem. They are doing it all good. In everyone's eyes, they are holy, right? They are the right ones. We deserve the entry into God. And God is, Christ is telling them, no, this is not the way it is. Just because you do these things does not make you out to be any holier than the next person. And this is a corruption, I believe, of the mind, where we think through obedience we are granted some type of reward, i.e., getting into heaven or some salvific grace. While it is true that we should be obedient Christians, I can tell you that those who are the most obedient aren't the most loving. Those who are the most obedient aren't the most charitable. And those who are the most obedient aren't the best at taking care of their brothers and sisters. They only look out for themselves through their obedience. Because at the end of the day, when the curtains close, what they're concerned with is their own life. The tax collectors are no different than the ones we have today. Okay, they're doing a job, and some of them weren't doing it rightfully. Okay, some of them were just going around and collecting taxes, kind of like they were debt collectors, except by using phone, they were knocking on your doors and showing up to your house every day and demanding whatever amount of money you had to start knocking with that debt. That was what they were good at. That's what they were doing. So people despised them. But could you imagine you being an obedient Jewish tax collector that was out there collecting money on behalf of Rome? Okay, you're living obediently, you had this job, everybody hates you. All right, in what ways could you be a better brother or sister to your fellow believer? In what way could you show them that Christ is still within you, that you still have the heart of God, that you are still willing to take care of them? These things have to get done, but it doesn't mean that they have to get done in the orders that in the manner that which the higher power is demanding from the government. Think about this right now, what's going on in our world. A few months, about 2 months ago, I believe, or maybe last month, there was a family that was evicted from their home. And this is happening throughout California a lot, because California is a state that is very expensive to live in. And this is due to Silicon Valley and also Hollywood and all those entrepreneurial cities that are just booming with commerce. This family is evicted from their home and the police show up to remove them. The police, they don't show this in the media. The police actually pleaded with the owner of the apartment building and was like, listen, this family has nowhere to go. Like, if you evict them right now, they have no money. It's not his fault that he was working, and it's clear from his past history that he was paying the bills. And the police were there trying to get the owner of the apartment to keep him in there, like extend him. Like, no one's gonna move in here because no one is working. But the owner was running a business, right? And businesses have to function. And supply and demand, we need you out because I need my money. They put this family out. The police has a couple options. Even though they're there to do their job, right? They take it a step further. They show the family where the nearest shelter is. They give them a ride. They take all, because they left all their belongings that were there on the side of the road. And as they walked by, the family said that they broke down in tears because their entire life was just out there on display and they couldn't take any of it with them. They went to the shelter. Those same police officers got them there, and then they took their time and started a GoFundMe for those who are evicted from their homes due to COVID-19. That family was able to get back into a home. I believe that the father was able to find a job, and I hope that they're doing well. But it just comes to show us that just because we have a job where we have to exercise some form of authority that we are not so easily accepted by, what needs to happen, though, is there has to be an extension of ourselves where we are willing to say, you know what? Even though I am in this terrible job and that people just do not like, I can be a brother and sister to these individuals. I can show them that I have the Christ-like nature within me. I can show them what right looks like in a wrong situation. I can be more. I can be who Christ wants me to be. And I think that that is the most important. And as we prepare to close, I want you to think about your own lives. Do not think about how you're going to get into heaven. I think that this is something that's being preached very heavily. Like, you have to do this, otherwise, and you will get into heaven. If you don't do this, you won't get into heaven. That's not the focus. While it is a great reward and ultimately the one we all want, we shouldn't focus on things that are already given to us. If we are obedient in our lives, then this is already a given. It's not something that we have to tally up and make sure that we've passed 70 or 80% to enter. Through Christ, forgiveness is absolute, even to the murderer or rapist. This is true because Christ's love and forgiveness is equilateral. However, there is that time of judgment. What I ask for you to do is to examine your lives and to examine this coming week in what ways you could be better to your brother and sister through acts that show the Christ-like nature and through acts that also exhibit a charitable side of yourself, not one of show and tell. And that's the issue that we're running into now. We're so quick to show it and we're so quick to tell it. Sometimes it's the little things that we do and we don't say a word about it that go the farthest. We would have never known about the officers that helped them. The family put it out there that they did. The officers never did. That was not their intention. And who knows how many families that those officers were helping since they were getting evicted. Sometimes we have to reevaluate why we're doing things. And I think this week is a good week to do that. So let us start Monday off, or even today, as we prepare to leave and go forth into the world. And let us do the best good that we can, the best way that we know it, and in the most selfless ways possible. Be blessed.